Welcome back. Today we're going straight into, well, a pretty major financial and political storm brewing in Antigua and Barbuda.
Yeah, it's got all the elements, doesn't it? Big money, high-level politics, and some serious questions about who's actually responsible.
Exactly. We're unpacking what our source material calls the $15 million vehicle scandal. Sometimes it's even referred to as the chain gang scandal. Grim stuff.
$15 million. It's a number that really grabs your attention.
It really does. And it's public money, tied up in what looks like a systemic failure.
Mm.
Vehicles vanishing, mismanagement, right under the nose of a government ministry.
Mhm.
But here's the real kicker, the controversy we need to dig into today. Can the minister in charge of that exact ministry credibly claim to be the whistleblower?
Right, the person who was supposed to be steering the ship.
Yeah, the one who discovered the failure that happened on her watch. It feels odd.
It feels deeply contradictory. And that's really our mission today, isn't it?
Yeah.
To analyze this perspective we've reviewed, one that really challenges how we think about accountability and leadership.
So we're looking at the difference between genuine leadership, preventing problems.
Exactly. Prevention versus finding the mess afterwards, which this source argues might actually point to negligence.
What happens when the boss discovers the chaos they were meant to prevent?
That's at the core question.
Okay, let's set the scene. Who are the main players mentioned in our sources?
Well, you've got the Prime Minister, Gaston Browne, who seems to be pushing a particular narrative here.
And the focus is squarely on his wife, Honorable Maria Browne. She's the minister heading the very ministry where this $15 million catastrophe unfolded.
Right. The one directly responsible for that department's operation.
And the scale of it. The source material doesn't paint a picture of some, super sophisticated hidden scheme.
No, quite the opposite. It uses that phrase, the chain gang, suggesting they operated freely.
Freely, that implies. What?
Yeah.
A total lack of checks, brazenness.
It suggests, that whoever was involved felt pretty comfortable, like they weren't worried about being watched or caught. For a $15 million vehicle issue to develop like that,
Yep.
It suggests oversight was lacking for quite some time.
Which makes the attempt to frame the minister as the whistleblower even more, controversial.
Exactly. The source we looked at jumps on this immediately. It says the claim simply doesn't add up.
Why not? What's the core reasoning?
It's pretty straightforward, actually. As the head of the ministry, the ultimate responsibility lies with her. The classic phrase, the buck stops here.
Right.
And think about what whistleblowing usually means. It's generally someone lower down the chain.
Someone sticking their neck out.
Yeah, risking their job, maybe, to expose wrongdoing above them. They bypass the usual channels because the channels themselves might be compromised.
Okay.
But the minister, she is the channel, or at least at the top of it, within her ministry. For her to have to discover this mess, it implies the people she was supervising failed.
Her supervision failed too.
That's the argument. Critically, her oversight mechanism failed. That's what the source strongly suggests.
So distinguishing between whistleblowing and discovery is key here. Otherwise, people might just focus on the aha moment and forget how the problem started.
Precisely. It risks distracting from the initial and arguably more significant failure of management.
Does the material suggest why the Prime Minister might push this whistleblower narrative? Is it just damage control?
Well, the analysis certainly leans that way. It implies it's a way to sort of minimize the institutional breakdown.
Right, spin, basically.
If you frame the minister as the hero who found the problem, it shifts focus away from the fact the problem grew under her leadership. Discovering chaos below you isn't necessarily leadership. The source argues it's evidence of, poor management or maybe a lack of capacity to oversee things properly.
Leadership in this view would have stopped the $15 million problem from happening at all.
That's the definition presented. Proactive prevention, not reactive discovery.
Okay, but let me push back a bit just to explore this.
Yeah.
Even if it was late, doesn't she get any credit for eventually bringing it to light? I mean, finding it is better than trying to bury it, surely.
It is better than hiding it, absolutely. No one's disputing that. But the argument in this analysis is that discovering a problem you were fundamentally tasked with preventing. Well, that's not really an act of leadership to be celebrated. It's more like fulfilling a basic obligation after a failure has already occurred. There's a good analogy used. It's like, if you're the night watchman, right? And thieves clear out the vault because you nodded off.
Okay.
Waking up later and shouting, "Hey, we've been robbed," doesn't suddenly make you Employee of the Month. You failed at your primary job.
Which was to prevent the robbery in the first place.
Exactly. So the source separates courage from competence. Whistleblowing often takes courage. Oversight requires competence. And this $15 million scandal is presented as a failure of competence.
And that failure isn't erased just because it was eventually reported.
That's the core argument. Reporting it was necessary, mandatory even, once discovered. But it doesn't excuse the initial lack of competence that allowed it to happen.
That framing is pretty powerful. It uses these, like, everyday ideas to explain a complex government issue. Let's go back to that other analogy you mentioned, the one about the store manager.
Ah, yes. That one really highlights the difference between being proactive and reactive.
The analysis says real leadership is about prevention and vision, right? Building systems, so a $15 million fraud just can't happen easily. But reacting after the fact, the comparison was, it's like a store manager demanding praise after the shop's been emptied by thieves.
Simply because they eventually noticed the empty shelves.
Right, and the reason the thieves got away. The security cameras, the basic tools for oversight weren't working or weren't being monitored.
And that analogy gets right to the heart of the negligence claim. Discovering the loss confirms the manager's primary failure. They didn't ensure the basic security systems were operational.
So if this chain gang operated freely for so long,
It points to a fundamental systemic breakdown in oversight within that ministry. The political spin might focus on the discovery moment, but the underlying facts, according to this source, point to a major institutional failure.
a failure of basic stewardship of public funds.
Precisely. If you're entrusted with taxpayer money and somehow $15 million in vehicle assets gets mismanaged or goes missing under your leadership, the source calls that negligence, plain and simple.
And the person overseeing that can't then claim the moral high ground for finally noticing.
That's the argument laid out. Noticing the consequence of the rot doesn't absolve you from allowing the rot to set in.
Okay, so if the analysis is this clear that it's an oversight failure, what's the proposed solution? Where does the focus shift?
It shifts immediately to transparency and accountability. The demand is for the public to get the full picture. No more spin, just facts.
And specifically,
A full independent investigation into the entire $15 million scandal.
why is independence so crucial here? Why not an internal government probe?
Well, there's deep skepticism present in the source. Can the system that failed actually investigate itself effectively and impartially?
Good point.
The worry is that an internal or politically controlled investigation might end up focusing more on managing the political fallout, protecting reputations, rather than uncovering the whole truth.
What's the specific risk they warn about?
The risk is trying to hide the real culprits and, importantly, continuing this effort to flip the script to play the victim.
So doubling down on the whistleblower narrative as a shield.
Potentially, yes. That narrative could be used to distract from others who might share responsibility for the systemic negligence, maybe even people higher up the chain. It's a concern raised in the analysis.
Sounds like a classic political playbook.
Yeah.
Control how the story of the discovery is told, so you don't have to fully answer for the original failure.
Exactly that. Keep the spotlight on the discovery, and maybe the public overlooks the systemic issues that allowed it all to happen.
So the source's final word on this is pretty stark.
Extremely. It concludes that incompetence and lack of oversight brought us here in the first place. That's the root cause identified.
And if that's the cause.
Then the solution can't just be more internal promises or political gamesmanship. It has to be something more robust.
Which is why the call for a full, external, independent investigation is framed as the only real path forward.
Yes, as the only way to genuinely tackle the negligence that let this $15 million problem grow, and ultimately to try and restore some public trust. It's not just about getting the money back, it's about fixing the system.
Absolutely. This whole discussion has really drilled down into that critical line between, well, institutional failure and credible leadership.
We've seen how this analysis draws a very clear distinction. Finding a problem isn't the same as leading effectively, especially if the problem happened because your own systems failed.
Right. Finding it might just confirm the failure.
Exactly. So for you, the listener, as you process this, the material leaves us with a really important question. In a world saturated with information where political narratives are constantly shaped and spun, how do we, as critical observers, tell the difference between genuine, proactive leadership, the kind that stops these $15 million scandals before they start, and, well, a calculated attempt to rebrand a huge failure of basic management after the fact?
what is the true measure of accountability for public officials when such vast sums of public money are involved? Is it catching the problem or preventing it in the first place?
That's the tough question.
Indeed. Something to really ponder long after this deep dive ends. Thanks for joining us today.